Yeah, that's right.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Peace River, Manasota Regional Water Supply Authority meeting for April 2nd, 2025. Let the record show all commissioners are present. If you'll please rise for the invocation given by Commissioner Elton Langford, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today, Lord, and we just thank you for all that you do for us. Thank you for a beautiful day. And Lord, we ask now that you just give this board the wisdom and the knowledge that it needs to make the decisions to be best for this authority and those that we serve. Dear Heavenly Father, we lift up our men and women that protect us and serve us on a daily basis at home and abroad. Lord, we just thank you for this beautiful country we live in, and we just pray for it. We pray for everybody, Lord, that they continue to stay healthy, and Lord, we lift up those that are sick and ailing. We ask all these things now in Jesus' holy name. Amen.
Amen. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, next on the agenda, Host County remarks. Mrs. Hine.
Good morning. For the record, Mandy Hines, County Administrator. I'd like to take the opportunity to welcome the board members and all the attendees to DeSoto County this morning for our meeting. And I just wanted to take a minute to thank each of our elected officials. I think that sometimes you may not hear thank you enough for what you do. You all have to make really difficult decisions in your communities. And as members of this authority, and a testament to your commitment to that is, the most recent changes to the water supply agreement. And so I commend you for what you do and for sometimes giving up what's the best interest in your community to serve the region. And we really appreciate that, and we appreciate being a member of the authority. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'd just like to thank DeSoto County for allowing the quick switch to this chamber for the meeting. We had some conflicts in Charlotte County, so I appreciate the last minute accommodation. Thank you very much for that. Next, we move on to public comments. Any individual wishing to address the board on an item on the consent agenda or regular agenda, or an issue that does not appear on the agenda, should complete a request card. You will have 3 minutes, and I have 2 cards. First, we have Orville Howard. Sorry. He's one of our regulars. Good morning, sir.
You need to fix your speakers. I know that wasn't me. Oh. Hello, my name is Orville James Howard, and I want to wish you a happy Easter a bit early because there's no meetings any closer except for after. And thank you for keeping the water working. I forgot what I was going to say. But thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Orville, that sure is a nice mullet you working on there, buddy.
Next, we have Adeline Howard.
Hi, my name is Adeline Howard, and I'm 14. I just want to thank you for keeping the water going, and when I go to fast food restaurants, I can go to the bathroom and I can drink some good water, and that's it. I'm just grateful. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, next we are going to move on to the consent agenda, and we had some changes, Mr. Anderson?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Consent item 5, the dollar amount has been updated. The original information that went out online showed an incorrect value, so the term is correct. All the other information in the package is correct, but the new number is $729,346 for the ask.
I accept the motion to move the changes.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion and second to move the changes. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. Okay, gentlemen, any items you'd like to pull from the consent, or I will entertain a motion to approve the consent?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion and second to approve the consent. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. We're now going to move on to the regular agenda. Item number 1, water supply conditions report.
Hi, good morning, Katie Gilmore of your staff. Giving a presentation on regular item number 1, our standing water supply conditions report. This is for information purposes only, no action required. So first we'll go over the rainfall, river flow, withdrawal, storage conditions at the facility through March 16th. And then we'll talk about regional water supply deliveries to the customers for the month of February. Okay, so first up, the rainfall in the Upper Peace River Basin. This is the monthly rainfall for the last 2 years, going through the end of February in this case. The blue dash line is the historical average monthly rainfall, and the green line is the actual monthly rainfall received. So you can see we've had below average rainfall since November. January and February did inch up a little bit closer to the average. March is not on here, but March was pretty dry. We finished with only 0.64 inches for the month, and that is below the historical average of 2.87. The National Weather Service Climate Prediction Center is predicting below average rainfall for the next 2 months through April and May. Okay, the historical monthly Peace River flows for the last 2 years. Again, this one is updated through the middle of March, the 16th. The red line shows the minimum flow required for us to be allowed to withdraw water from the river, 130 cubic feet per second. The blue dash line is our historical monthly average, and the green is the actual monthly flow received. So just like the rainfall has been down, the flow has been a little bit below average the last few months. The flow has remained through this graph above the minimum to be able to withdraw above the 130. The month of March, however, did finish at only 266 for the average CFS, which is below the 854 typical average. And as of the last day of the month, we were just above that 130 at 139 CFS. And as far as withdrawals, again, this is for the last 2 years, updated through the middle of March, the 16th. Withdrawals for January and February are seen here as 30.9 and 25.5 MGD. And as of the day of this graph, we were still withdrawing at 21 million gallons per day. But due to low river flows, we stopped withdrawing as of the beginning of last week. So at this point, we are no longer pulling off the river until we start getting some higher rains and some higher flows. All right, but our surface water storage system is doing very well. This is the last 3 years through the middle of March. We have been able to keep it mostly full with the rainfall we have had and flows we've had the last few months. As of the 16th on this graph, we're showing 6.7 billion gallons in the reservoir systems. That has dropped a little bit since we are pulling the water from the reservoirs to the plant, but not pulling from the river to the reservoir. But right now, as of the end of the month, we're at 6.3 billion gallons. Okay, and then looking at the aquifer storage and recovery system, this is for the last 2 years, and the blue line shows the total volume that we have in storage, and the orange represents what that usable volume would be out of that, which is about 60%. We haven't recovered ASR since last year in May. We recharged the system between September and December of 2024, and so our storage has been sitting at 8.8 billion gallons since we finished that recharge, which gives us a usable storage of about 5.2 billion gallons. So if you take the surface water reservoir system and the ASR system and you roll that up into how many days of supply we have, this shows you that the 6.7 billion gallons in the reservoirs plus the 5.2 billion gallons of usable ASR would give us a combined supply storage of about 11.9 billion gallons. This is through the end of February. So that would equal 397 days at our average annual withdrawal of about 30 MGD. And only 343 days at our contractual obligations of 34.7. So I did look at this at where we are today since we are no longer pulling from the river. And currently the estimated days of supply has dropped slightly, but we're still at 385 and 333 days. So excellent storage conditions at this time, even though we're not pulling off the river. All right, so switching gears over to our regional production and use for the month of February. The table here shows the authority, the member customer water supply capacity and production for the month. The combined regional capacity of the authority and our customers is around 107 million gallons per day. And in February, we delivered 31.4 million gallons per day to the region. The members and the customers together delivered an additional 61.59, giving a total regional production of 93 million gallons per day. Of that, 3.71 was what Manatee delivered to their non-authority customers, the town of Longboat Key, city of Palmetto, city of Bradenton. So if you take those out, we have a total February demand for authority members and customers of 89.28 million gallons per day. And that's about 83% of that 107.3. All right, so now walking through each of the customers and members for the month of February. I'm starting with Charlotte County. Charlotte purchased 13.76 million gallons from the authority, and they self-supplied 0.86 from their burnt sewer facility. That gives them a total use of 14.62 million gallons per day, which is 76% of their total available capacity. For DeSoto County, they purchased 0.83 million gallons per day from the authority, self-supplied 0.37 for a total of 1.2 million gallons per day, and that equals 81% of their capacity. Manatee County, of course, is not purchasing water from the authority, so this shows their production. So in total, they produced 51.2 million gallons per day from their water supply facilities in the month of February. 43.35% or million gallons per day of that went to serve their retail customers. Additional 3.71 went to their wholesale customers that are not authority members. So again, that's Longboat Key, Palmetto, and Bradenton. And then 4.14 was supplied from Manatee to Sarasota County. So that gives them a 97% use of their total permitted capacity. And then for Sarasota, Sarasota purchased 15.72 million gallons per day from the authority and supplied 5.90 from their Carlton facility. They imported 4.15, giving them a total use of 25.76, which is 84% of their capacity. All right, and then last up, the city of Northport. Northport purchased 1.09 million gallons per day, and they self-supplied 3.26 between their facilities at Macahatchee Creek and Welland Park. They exported 0.01 to Sarasota, giving them a total usage of 4.35, and for them that's 53% of their available capacity. All right, so looking at that as a total region, this here shows the water years of 2014 through 2024, plus our running 12-month annual average. This is all regional deliveries to members and customers, as well as non-customers, so Manatee wholesale non-customers. As of February, our running 12-month average was 89.15, which is 83% of the capacity. If you did pull out Manatee's non-authority customers, then the total drops to 85.56, which is 80% of that 107.3. And the breakdown of the regional demand for the authority members and customers in February, again, the total use was 93 million gallons per day, which is 87%, leaving 14.3 or 13% of unused regional capacity available. All right, and then I did want to spend a few minutes today just kind of updating you on something we have coming up operationally in all of our systems, except for Manatee. We will be doing a regional free chlorine conversion, and I'm sure you've been briefed on this by your staff already. The authority and our customers will coordinate to temporarily switch our disinfectant in the distribution system from our usual chloramine, which is chlorine combined with ammonia, to just chlorine or free chlorine. That'll take place in late April. So both chlorine and chloramine are commonly used disinfectants throughout the country. Chloramine is more common in Florida because the large distribution systems and the warm temperatures make it difficult to maintain a residual with just free chlorine. Chloramine is more stable, and it also has the benefit of less disinfectant byproduct formation. So the chloramine systems can benefit from an occasional change to free chlorine. This helps clean the natural occurring biofilms that can develop in pipelines that can make chloramine disinfection slightly less effective. And a regional conversion did take place in 2023. That was the authority plus Sarasota, Charlotte, DeSoto counties, the city of Northport, and the city of Punta Gorda and Inglewood also participated at the same time. At that time, we changed the disinfectant for a total of 60 days. Sarasota County was the exception. They did it just for 30 days at the end. That was the first free chlorine conversion for a lot of the utilities that participated, and it was our first time that we coordinated as a region. A lot of systems that do these conversions do them with some regularity, so maybe every year, every couple of years, just to keep the distribution system cleaned and maintained. So we talked amongst ourselves, and those that participated were very happy with the results in their systems and thought it'd be a good thing to do with some sort of regularity. So we're going to do another one. So now it's been about 2 years since the first. This year's conversion will occur for approximately 2 weeks. The dates right now are April 22nd through May 6th. This year it'll be Sarasota County, Charlotte County, the DeSoto County, and the City of Northport, and of course the authority. And the messaging has begun, so we put out information on our website, done press releases. The members and the customers have done so as well, so you may have seen some of this, seen some of the social media campaigns. And so I'm sure your staff can give you a little bit more information if you have any questions about your own systems. And then also just point out, of course, we have notified DEP about the change as required anytime you have a change in disinfectant in your system. Okay, and so with that, I'd be happy to take any questions you have.
Any member questions? I have a quick comment on the conversion. Are you dialing in the frequency of that? Is there an industry standard? Did you mention some places do it annually? We did it a few years ago. I mean, what can we expect? And,
There's not a,
yeah, and the cost associated with this in terms of what we're currently doing and going to the free chlorine, is that a push on the cost? Or is it?
and I'm not sure exactly on your systems. I would suspect it's not a huge cost. So to answer the first question, there's not a set, you should do it on this time. It has to do with how large your system is, how many dead ends, the warm weather. Different systems respond better. If you have a regular flushing program, maybe you don't have as much of an issue from chloramines as you might if you never flush your system. It just depends. So our thought as a region was, it's been 2 years. I know Sarasota, Charlotte, some of the other customers mentioned they've seen good things in their distribution system. The chlorine residual is holding up better than before we did it. But it's starting to drop off a little bit. And so we think the 2-year mark is a good time. We're going to do it for a shorter duration. And moving forward is, let's see, let's evaluate and continue to decide. I know DeSoto County, they do their own every year, I believe, or maybe more often. So some place, Englewood does theirs at least every year. So some people do it with more frequency. In this region, we haven't needed to do one. We've been able to maintain the systems without, but there was the benefit after we did the first one. So right now, 2 years, and maybe a year from now, we'll check in and see if we think we need to do another one then, or if we need to wait 2 years or go longer. And the cost for us is basically turning off the ammonia feed, and you're feeding enough chlorine to maintain just the chlorine residual. But for us, once it leaves the door, it has free chlorine. For the members and customers, everyone's system's differently, but there's some flushing involved to move that water through your system, so there's some stack time involved. I know you may have to inject additional chlorine at some of the pump stations because that residual will not last the whole system. That's why we don't use it regularly. So each system's differently, and I'm sure your staff can kind of give you an idea of the exact dollar amount, but you're basically not adding ammonia. So if you're adding more chlorine, that might be a wash, but there's probably some staff time involved and staff overtime potentially.
Yeah, I was getting some feedback from my constituents or users that the strong odor was like drinking pool water, and then issues potentially with clothes in the washer with the chlorine and some other things, but that obviously dissipated over time as it worked its way through the system. I guess it depends where you are on the line and when it gets to you. I know I had it in my house, I filtered my water through the refrigerator with a filter, but you could smell it.
It's definitely a change, and that's why there's a lot of messaging going out, especially I know Charlotte and Sarasota, DeSoto, Northport doing their own messaging, making sure that the customers are aware of the change, so they're not as concerned, and then being available to answer questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, 2025 ADC bond financing and a request to proceed. So this is an actionable item.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of your board, and Lena, your staff. Myself and Natalie Sidor with Pratt will be handling the bond financing request to proceed. Before I hand this over to Natalie, I'd just like to take a few seconds to discuss to respond to a question that's come up a couple times. This slide is in the back of your board packet. We moved this up, so you might have it in a different spot in your board packet. So we've had a question come up a couple times about refunding gains and losses, and refunding gains and losses for our entity is under GASB 23. So that's the Governmental Accounting Standards for number 23 standard. And this standard says that refunding gains and losses are amortized over the life of the new debt or old debt, and all that amortized gain or loss is the difference between your old carrying value of your debt, which includes premiums, it could include discounts, it could include a prior refunding loss and gain, as compared to your new carrying value on the debt. This calculation in no way, shape, or form represents actual cash savings. On every one of the refunded bonds that we have done at the authority, there have been substantial cash savings involved. It's just that this is one of those fun accounting calculations that we get to do every year, much like the net pension liability that we must do, OPEB, those type of liabilities that are only for financial statements. So for example, on the 2020 bonds, we had a bond refunding loss of $206,000 that's being amortized over the life of the bond, but the actual cash savings, interest savings to all of your members and the city of Northport was about $24.5 million. We see the same type of thing with our 2024A bonds that we just refunded back in October. Of course, but in this instance, we had a refunding gain of $2.78 million and a cash savings of 9.3. I will tell you that the refunding gains are not something that you would expect to see. You would expect to see a refunding loss when you do a refunding. I understand that there may be further confusion because I know some of your counties on your annual comprehensive financial reports, you do not include the amortized gains or losses on your refunded debt. And that is a difference in the rules that the GFOA has for general purpose governments and their ACFRs and what requirements we have as an enterprise fund. So as an enterprise fund, we have to show all of those refunded gains and losses within our financial statements on Note 5. So before I pass this to Natalie, I'll take any questions on this topic.
You're looking at me, I guess, because...
No, you're right in front of me, so...
No, I know.
I just get nervous up here.
Yeah, I talked about this in the past.
Yes.
So I appreciate
Yeah.
the update, but you mentioned some counties on their CAFRs, how they show this. I thought all counties are required by statute to adopt the government accounting principles in their reporting.
They do, but within the annual comprehensive financial report, there's actually two different, call them templates that the Government Finance Officer Association puts out, and they're the ones that you submit your ACFR to the certificate program. So there's one template for a general purpose government, which would be a city, a county, you dealing with governmental funds, proprietary funds, fiduciary funds, all those types of different funds, where the authority as a special independent district, we're only an enterprise fund. So for us, the template says, thou shalt include refunding gains, losses. The debt section is extremely different than what you'd see in the general government ACFRs, just because of the additional information that we include.
Any member questions regarding refunding gains and losses? Okay. Go
I
ahead.
don't have any questions.
Yes, sir.
Just, nothing but positive comments on this. I'm just adding up $35 million of savings that goes directly to the bottom line.
Yes, sir.
And, I think it's exceptional that, taking action, seeing what the opportunities are, and refunding was, great process, so thank you for that.
No problem. Happy to help, and I've got a great team with Craig that we're always looking out for this.
I am a financial advisor, and afterwards we'll get together. I don't understand how we got a refunding gain of nearly $3 million, so we'll talk about that later. That's outstanding.
I actually can send you the calculation. I was surprised that it's a well, sir, and I had to call our auditor, and I said, listen, can you please double check this, because this is one I haven't seen.
Yeah, no, that's great.
For sure. All right, well, with that, I'm going to pass it over to Natalie, who will have the more fun discussions of bonds.
Good
Did you
morning.
say rebatable?
I
or
said
debatable?
debatable.
Talk about bonds.
Natalie Sedora Crack, acting as the authority's financial advisor. And the rest of the presentation today is really just a follow-up to our discussion in February regarding the authority's long-term financing plans. As Ann mentioned, we will have a motion at the end of this requesting approval from the board to move forward with the first bond issue. So in terms of the market, really more of the same. We completed the first quarter of 2025. Essentially, we're still seeing strong market reactions to economic data and market news. You know, interest rates have continued to remain in a relatively tight range. We started the year with a 10-year MMD, which represents the benchmark tax-exempt rate at about a 306. It ended yesterday at a 321, so only up about 15 basis points. But I will tell you, since from the beginning of the year until now, we have seen larger swings on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. But we still anticipate rates to kind of remain in the same tight range that they have over the past couple of years. In terms of the Series 2025 bonds that we're looking at really three pieces or three series of bonds. The first one is going to fund the surface water system expansion project. That always gets me. Estimated at about $280 million, made up of the three pieces you see here: the Peace River facility expansion, the reservoir pump station, and then mitigation costs. We're also looking to fund the Phase 2B pipeline project with Charlotte. And then we do have a small refunding opportunity of the authority Series 2015 bonds. So in terms of the first piece, the surface water expansion project, this is the largest piece, $280 million. We're looking at 30-year debt. We plan for interest only in the first 3 years to give the project time to be completed. We will then start amortizing the principal after that point. Right now, based on current market conditions, we're looking at an all-in interest rate in the mid to high 4% range on that piece, which equates to about $22 million of annual debt service, again, following that initial 3-year interest-only period. The Phase 2B pipeline project, similarly, we're looking at 30-year debt here. Given that that project is expected to be complete next year, we would plan for interest only over the first year or so, and then begin amortizing the principal once that project is complete. Again, looking at an interest rate in the mid 4% for this piece, estimated at about $3.5 million of annual debt service right now. The refunding, as I mentioned, is small, but given that we're doing a new money transaction anyway, you really do achieve economies of scale and no additional cost by throwing it in there, assuming it generates cash flow savings. Right now it does, and so we would look to include this. You know, the savings are minimal, so we're going to continue to monitor it. If it gets to a point where there aren't savings, we would of course cut out this piece. So this is a piece that may or may not ultimately be included, depending on where rates are when we go to market and price those bonds. This really just shows what we're looking at in terms of final debt service after the issuance of the Series 2025 bonds. And again, I mentioned this at the last board meeting. Given your existing debt service structure, we would look to fill in sort of the back end once a lot of the existing bonds roll off to achieve an overall aggregate debt service schedule after the Series 2025 bonds are issued. Again, based on current market conditions, we think that'll be around $32, $33 million a year, and that would include the existing debt that you have on your books, plus this first issue of Series 2025 bonds. The line of credit, we talked a little bit about the line of credit at the last meeting. The authority entered into a $100 million line of credit in October of 22 with PNC Bank. There was about $56 million outstanding as of March 15th. That's a little bit less than the figure we talked about at the last board meeting. Some funds have come in that were used to pay down a portion of that line of credit, so there is some additional capacity that was created with that payoff. The original plan was to basically pay off that entire line of credit by the maturity date of October 2025. Given that some of the aspects of the surface water project have changed, the timing has changed, we have asked PNC for an extension on the maturity date of that line of credit. We learned yesterday that PNC has approved an extension on that line of credit. We don't have the details yet, but they have been through their initial review and credit process and have approved an extension. So we will be working with staff and the authority's legal and financing team to go through those details, and we will bring all of the details and request approval of that extension at a future board meeting. So in terms of next steps.
Just a quick question
Yep.
on the line of credit
Yep.
before you move on to the next
Mhm.
slide. So there will be costs associated with that, fees and things like that to do the extension.
There will, yes.
Yeah. Is it typically a percentage of the line of credit, or do they charge some type of lump sum fee?
Are you for the bank or just in?
Any fees associated with extending the line.
Well, you'll have professional fees, right? Legal fees, advisory fees. It's typically less than putting a line of credit in place. I can't really speak to the bank fees. I know we have a PNC representative here, so I'm sure you could come up and speak to that if you'd like. But there will be costs that are associated with the extension, similar to when you do a bond issue or when we put the line of credit in place. But in terms of the exact bank fees, would you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just curious, is it a percentage of the line of credit? I mean, how does that work?
Good morning, Nick A. PNC. Thank you, Natalie. No, the bank's not going to charge any fees other than, like Natalie said, professional fees. FA fees, legal fees, bond counsel, bank counsel, that's it. But the bank is not charging the district any upfront fees, commitment fees, nothing like that.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. That was Commissioner Beard, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As far as the payoff goes, is there a specific amount of time? Is there a way that we can pay that off earlier? Or are we going to be penalized for paying it off earlier?
No, there is no penalty for early payoff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Cutzinger, you're recognized.
Yeah, back to the line of credit, did we determine that the amount of our line of credit is sufficient? I know we were going to take a look at that.
Yes, we talked about that a little bit. Again, in February, there was about $75 million outstanding on that line of credit. Since that time, some funds have come in and been applied to prepay that line because there's no prepayment penalty, you can pay it off. So right now, we're at about $56 million, so we feel comfortable that gives us the capacity we need to draw on the $100 million, and that there would be no need to increase the line from the current $100 million.
And my assumption would be that the interest rate on the line of credit is significantly more than our bond interest rate.
It's about the same. It's a variable rate, so it's a little bit different because the rate on the line of credit is a formula based on a variable rate. But since short-term rates have gone up, it's in the ballpark.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Beard, you had an additional follow-up?
No, I'm kind of curious in regards to what is our strategy as far as paying that off, because we're going to have to pay interest first on that particular line of credit. Do we have a strategy put in place in order to see how long it's going to take us to pay off that line of credit?
We do. So the original plan when we put the line in place in October 2022 was to pay it off now, essentially with this bond issue. And that was because we thought basically it was going to be one big bond issue to fund the completion of the surface water expansion project plus these other capital projects. Now that we have developed more of a phased financing strategy, so we're going to do one bond issue now and another one later, given that some of the timing aspects of the surface water project have been moved out, we plan to pay off the entire line of credit with the second bond issue. And I can talk through that. That's what I was going to talk through next, is the timing on that. So this bond issue that we're doing, we will not pay off any of the line of credit. When we do the next one, a portion of those proceeds will be used to pay off the line of credit.
Okay. And this line of credit, is this a variable rate?
It is.
Okay, it is, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you. Any other comments on the line of credit? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of next steps, as I mentioned today, we would request your approval to proceed with financing package 1, which is the bond issue I just described. We'll go through the documentation and ratings, basically the entire bond process, come back to the board in June to request approval of the bond documents. Once we have that approval, we can move on to marketing and pricing and closing of the bonds, which we would anticipate to occur in the July-August timeframe. Essentially, right when we end that bond issue, we're going to request approval to proceed with that second phase of the bond issue. And we would anticipate that to take a few months and that closing in late 2025, early 2026. And with that, unless you have any other questions.
No, any member questions? If there's none, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve and authorize staff to proceed on the 2025 APC bonds.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve and authorize staff to proceed on the 2025 APC bonds. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3, Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan 2025 update.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Jim Guidi, your Director of Water Resources and Planning. I'll be introducing this agenda item. This is about our efforts to complete our 2025 Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan update. I'll give you a quick background and overview and a quick update on the latest customer 2025 demand projections to kick things off. I'll then be followed by our consultant, Laura Baumberger, with Carollo Engineers. This is an info item and no action is required. So quick background and overview on what the plan is. We have an authority strategic plan, as you know. It calls for every 5 years that we should update our integrated plan. The focus of those plans is over a 20-year period, so in this case, 2025 through 2045. The plans include looking at the region-wide demands, doing an inventory of current and potential future sources, what those capacities of those sources might be. We look at our existing and projected regional transmission pipelines, potential interconnects. We also do a lot of hydraulic modeling to see how the system all fits and works together. We also look at water conservation and demand management opportunities. We're also looking at the possibility of doing more beneficial reuse of reclaimed water. So at the October 23 meeting, the board approved Carollo to undertake the plan. Today we're going to present just a portion of the plan, and then we'll come back in June and do the rest of it. So today you'll hear from Laura, predominantly focused on demands, a bit on some potential supply sources. And then June, you'll hear the remainder of the plan. So quickly, just for context, and this is about the latest, greatest 2025 customer demand projections. As I mentioned, the plan that we're working on is only done every 5 years. And the Master Water Supply contract, of course, wants us to look at this more frequently, which makes sense. We look at those every year. And with the latest customer demand projections came in January of this year. So just a brief overview of those 25 demands and the demand projection aspects of the Master Water Supply contract. Let me just first say, suffice to say, that the demands that we're seeing in 2025 are on the same trajectory as we saw in 24. Demands are actually a little bit higher, and no surprise, I'm sure, to any one of you who's overseeing the growth in your areas. But within the Master Water Supply contract, one of the key things that we ask for those annual projections is to inform our 5-year CIP and also our 20-year CNA. Which Mike knows will be presenting in the next agenda item. It does require, when looking at that 20-year time period, to look very closely at the first 7 years. We call that the 7-year window. Within that 7-year window, we're looking for any new supplies that a member might be looking for. When I say new this year, that's not including the Surface Water Supply Expansion Project that was new last year, but now it's in the Master Water Supply contract. So in this particular 2025 latest projections we've gotten, there's no new water supplies that are being requested in that 7-year window. Just a quick overview of what we're seeing for the fall 2025 through 24 planning period. 3 of the members are showing no need for a new water supply source over that 20-year time period, whether that be local self-supply or water from the authority. Whereas 2 others are in need of water over the 20-year period. With respect to Charlotte County, they showed no need for new water supply in the mid and west service areas. We also refer to those as the Peace River Facility Service Area for convenience. Currently, the allocation that's under the Master Water Supply contract, they'll have 19.1 MGD They're projecting 17.2 in 2045, so perhaps a surplus of around 2 MGD come 2045 is projected. They do, however, have a need for South County new supplies. They're considering their own self-supplies down there. That includes burn store, which already exists, expanding burn store, looking at developing the Babcock Ranch well field, and possibly other sources of supply to serve those areas. Manatee County also needs new water supply. It is looking at, again, at its own self-supply, and it's also considering the potential for up to 5 MGD from the authority come 2036, so about 11 years out. So that's what we're seeing on that front. And with that, that's the update on the customer 25 demand projections. I'm going to turn it over to Laura. She'll cover the overview of the water supply plan, demand components of the plan, and the remainder of the plan will be presented come June. If you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay, we'll keep it rolling.
Thank you, Jim. Good morning, Laura Bomberger with Carollo Engineers. As Jim mentioned, I will be presenting a little bit more on an overview of the Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan, what the contents will be, look at the demand projections that were developed as part of the project, and some existing potential projects to meet those projected demands, and then a schedule for completing the remainder of the project. So first, on the purpose of this plan, so Florida statutes mandates that water management districts prepare regional water supply plans for their water management district every 5 years. So Swift-Mud has currently completed their 2025 regional water supply plan, and the authority's integrated plan will be completed in a parallel time frame to be integrated into that regional plan. Once this project is completed, the authority's integrated plan will be transmitted to the district for inclusion in their document. And this really serves as a strategic guide for the next 20 years and can also be used to support cooperative funding in the future. So the contents of the plan will be an inventory of the existing supplies and treatment capacities within the 4-county region, the projected demands through both 2045 and a longer-term projection to 2075 to look at a 50-year range, identify potential water supply projects within the region to meet those demands. And then Jim mentioned the regional transmission system. We updated the model, looked at the new pipelines that are envisioned and how those projected future needs from the authority could be delivered to the customers. We have assessed water conservation in the region, demand management, as well as reclaimed water that could be used to offset potable demand. So for the demand projection update, this bar chart illustrates the past 20 years regional water supply actual demand for your members and customers, and it does include those consecutive customers. So you might see the 86.81 number that Katie presented is the same here. And if you look at the past 5 years in particular, the rate of growth has been substantial, averaging more than 4% per year for each of the last 5 years. So those bars are now converted into these black dots, and when we also place the projected demands that have been submitted by your members and customers, those are the 2 blue dashed lines. Jim mentioned the 2025 projections that were submitted just this January. Those are in the light blue, and the dark blue is the customer projections from last year in 2024. So they're on the same trajectory as your historical use most recently, and the 2025 projections submitted by your customers just slightly higher than last year. So we all know that that rate of growth is potentially not likely to continue in the next 20 years. So we do look at a range of different demand projection methodologies. We looked at 7 different methodologies, which is consistent with your previous integrated regional water supply plans. And that includes population projections from the Bureau of Economic and Business Research, or BEBR, from University of Florida, as well as the demands presented or submitted by your customers. And that results in a range of potential future demands. We call it the low and the high, and then we have a median. And that light blue line is the median that we'll be carrying forward to identify projects to meet over the next 20 years. We also transposed a couple of trend lines on this chart. You can see the past 5-year trend line correlates very well with the customer provided projection, which was the highest of the 7 methodologies. And then the past 10-year projection, the last 10-year trend line correlates better with the median, which is more indicative of the rate of growth you would see over a longer period of time. So based on that median demand projection, regionally, the need does exist for future supply. This chart shows the authority's existing capacity in the dark blue bar at the bottom. That includes the surface water system expansion project. And then the light blue bar is the member self-supply. And you can see that holistically for the whole region, you come short just past 2040 of the existing supplies meeting that projected demand. But in addition to the projected demand, previous integrated regional water supply plans have recommended a capacity standard, which is comprised of two components. One of those is that you want to bring your supplies online, a little bit before when they're needed. So the standard is to bring new supplies online before your demand exceeds 90% of your capacity. That's one component of the capacity standard. So we add 10% to make sure we stay ahead of that growth curve. And then there's a 6% rotational capacity, which is recommended to have some additional supply for drought or water shortages, emergencies within the region. And when you combine those two pieces together, it results in just under 17% additional capacity that you want to maintain to continue to have enough water to supply the region. So 2 projects have been identified that could potentially lead to some of that requirement, those being the authority's brackish groundwater RO project, as well as Manatee County's Buffalo Creek brackish groundwater project. Both of those are permitted supplies that are either undergoing or have completed preliminary design, and amongst the 2 of them can meet that median demand projection and provide some of that capacity standard. So the authority's project, the drilling and testing program has been completed. As I mentioned, the permit is secured and the preliminary design is done. That would result in about 8 MGD of allocable capacity to the region. Manatee County's project is also under preliminary design and it is permitted, with the current permit allowing for about 3 MGD of finished water capacity, and the county may look to increase that to up to 5 MGD or potentially 8 MGD in the future. But even beyond those 2 projects, there is a need for more supply in the region to continue to maintain that capacity standard. So the plan will identify other potential projects, both for the authority as well as all of the different members of the authority for local projects. And the plan will present all of those projects, potential capacities, estimated costs, to outline a range of options to meet the needs in the future. And that is the region-wide perspective, getting back to just the authority. With the completion of the surface water system expansion project, the authority's capacity will be 52.7 MGD on an annual average basis. You can see that in the orange dashed line here. And then in this chart, the blue bar represents the customer water supply need from the authority. And as Jim mentioned, Manatee County has estimated that in approximately 2036, they may need 5 MGD from the authority. So the authority's brackish groundwater project could potentially fill that need. In terms of schedule, to finish up the project, we'll be submitting the draft plan in early April, both for staff review as well as member and customer review. We hope to receive comments by the end of the month, and then we would issue a final draft in May, which would be presented to you in June, and then finalized in July and subsequently transmitted to the district. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any member questions on this item? Okay, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Okay, we're going to move on to item number 4, draft 5-year capital improvement plan and 20-year capital needs assessment. This item is presented for the board's information and discussion only.
Good morning, members of the board. Mike Knowles with Authority Staff, presenting regular agenda item number 4. This is a draft 5-year capital improvement plan and 20-year capital needs assessment. And yes, this is for information purposes only. I'll be covering the purpose, development, and application of our capital improvement plan, do an overview of the 5-year CIP and 20-year CNA as it relates to budget and project type, highlight the key projects in our 5-year CIP, and discuss the next steps and schedule. So the purpose of our capital improvement plan is to serve as a working blueprint, not only for sustaining and improving the authority's existing infrastructure, but also to best look at the future additions to the authority and look at long-term planning. To do that, we bring in the 4 departments from the authority, planning headed by Jim Guida, operations by Kate Gilmore, finance by Ann Lee, and engineering by myself. I do have other staff, I'm not saying I'm by myself. So with input from all of our department heads and everyone understanding the common goals for these projects, we move forward and really rely heavily on the integrated regional water supply plan that was just presented on. That helps us look at the long-term need in the region and not just meeting short-term needs with some of the pipeline projects especially. And then the biggest contribution to the CIP is our customers. Meeting with our members, understanding the project needs and the project goals helps us finalize our capital improvement plan. So an overview of the CIP project, we have a total of 18 projects identified over 20 years, 8 of which are transmission main projects, 4 of which are in our 5-year CIP, and various components, whether they be feasibility studies, design, or construction. 5 water supply projects, 2 of which are in our 5-year CIP, and 5 system-wide benefit projects, 2 of which are in our 5-year CIP. Looking at the estimated budget, starting 2026, for the next 5 years, we had $659 million identified for the projects, the largest of which is for the water supply project at $619 million, $11 million for system-wide benefit projects, and $29 million for transmission system. You can see over the next really 3 fiscal years, the majority of that money is being spent predominantly on the water system treatment and storage expansion. And over the next 2 fiscal years, we project to spend the remaining amount secured for our grant funding. Most of that is through the district. I know it's here in the audience today. So a total of $112 million would be allocated over the next 2 fiscal years towards our projects. Looking at the 20-year CNA, which is inclusive of the 5-year CIP budget, not in addition to, we have a total estimated cost of about $1.2 billion. 891 million of that is for water supply projects, and 265 million is towards water transmission main, with 40 million towards system-wide benefit projects. And again, the next 3 fiscal years are really the majority of the projected spending, with the next increase coming with the next water supply project coming online by fiscal year 2036. Highlighting key projects in our 5-year CIP. The water supply program is really 2 projects, the treatment and then storage and conveyance portions. The treatment being the PRF expansion, which will expand the treatment capacity of the plant to allow for 18 MGD of additional allocation to our customers in conjunction with the PR3 project, which is the 9 billion gallon reservoir and additional river intake pump station, reservoir pump stations, and large diameter transmission main to connect that infrastructure. 2 of our transmission main projects in our 5-year CIP are currently under construction. On the left is the Phase 2B pipeline, which is 13 miles of 42-inch diameter pipes for growing demands in west of Charlotte County. That construction started a year ago, and as of today, we have 5 miles of pipe in the ground. With the Phase 3C pipeline project, it's approximately 8 miles of transmission main, serving growing demands in northeast Sarasota County. Construction started October of 23. I'm happy to report that all of the transmission main has been installed for that project, and we're looking to test, disinfect, and put that into service in the next month or 2. We even discussed potentially a valve turning ceremony as I proclaim it, so that might be in the future. The pumping and storage components of the 3C pipeline are due to start construction later this year under a GMP amendment. They'll be brought to the board for consideration August or October. The other 2 transmission main projects, it would be the Phase 3C extension project, which would be feasibility and routing study, looking to take the pipeline at the terminus of the 3C at Fruitville into looking at different potential connection points to bring an additional 2 miles north to the university line to facilitate future connections. The other project is the Kings Highway project. This is in coordination with a roadway widening project due to start construction December of 29. We don't anticipate having to relocate 2 miles of transmission main, but we do estimate we'll have to relocate above grade appurtenances like air release valves.
A question, Commissioner Beard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you go back to the last slide? When do you, no, not that one ahead with Manatee County. When do you anticipate that study being completed for Manatee County?
The
feasibility study.
Sure, phase 3C extension. The timeline for this hasn't been set in stone. It's within our 5-year window. I think we're just talking about starting to look at how we're going to procure somebody to start looking at that study. For the previous study we did, we advertised that, and it was the 3C project, which included 3C extension as well. There's some factors that have changed since then, and other potential locations that could be a lot closer and a lot less expensive than what was envisioned even 3-4 years ago. So we're at the early stages now of identifying how we're going to procure that designer to start looking at the feasibility and routing study.
Okay.
But within the 5-year window.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And our 2 system-wide benefit projects, we have the Water Resources and Construction Department building. The authority is looking to construct a new 5,000 square foot administration laboratory building to replace the existing 60-year-old water resource building that we refer to as the ranch house. It's taken significant damage in the last 2 hurricane seasons, and currently do not have staff residing in that building. Then we have the RV Griffin Reserve Solar Array project. We're looking to construct a 2-megawatt solar array currently proposed on the RV Griffin property. The draft CIP 20-year CNA and solar array.
Okay, go back to the solar array. Can you do a little more, expand on that a little bit? What is that, and are we involved in that?
Yes.
Sorry,
Sure. Sure. So there is some history. We've actually done a couple different studies looking at this, and where we're at now at the terminus of the last study, we cited several areas within the RV Griffin, just north of the treatment facility, that could site a 2-megawatt structure. That is the largest that we'd be permitted to build, and that would supply a majority of the power for the plant. So we're looking at the feasibility of that because you've got to look at the payback period. And the authorities in a grandfathered in rate that's less expensive than maybe some other people are looking at. So we're still looking at the feasibility of doing this, what the payback period would be, and really if we can get some grants towards this project to make that payback period shorter and more effective.
Okay, and that'll come back to us as you fill out those details again.
Yes, sir. All of these projects will come back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I seem to remember that before I was on this board, there were discussions about using solar power to offset operating costs. And I think this has been in the works for years, these discussions.
Yeah, yes. In fact, Richard might be itching to say something, because I know he's led some of the previous studies.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
But yes, you're right. There's been at least 2 studies that I've seen. So the latest by Black & Veatch showed, I think it's about a 10-year payback window. But prices have gone up since that study was completed over a year ago, so we've got to revisit that and look at that payback period.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the next steps, the CIP was shared with your professional staff last month. We've looked to take any input from the board at this meeting, plus with the professional staff at our next meeting in May, hosted by Sarasota County, and then bring the finalized CIP back to this board in June for consideration. With that, if I take any additional questions or input the board has.
Any member comments on the capital improvement plan? Okay, thank you, sir. Next, we're going to move on to item number 5, update reservoir pumping station early works package to Archer Western. This is an actionable item.
For the record, Mike Knowles with Authority Staff presenting regular agenda item number 5. This is the surface water supply expansion project update, reservoir pump station early works package to Archer Western. The agenda for today would be to review the existing procurement strategy for the surface water supply expansion project, update on those individual projects, where they're at, design, construction, and then talk about the item that is in front of the board today for promotion, which is the reservoir pump station early works. So reviewing the procurement strategy that we have for the surface water supply expansion project, it's really broken up into, well, it's composed of 2 projects. We've got the treatment side on the Peace River facility expansion, and then the Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3, which is the storage and conveyance portion of that project. Together, that's how we get the 18 MGD of allocation to our customers. The Peace River facility expansion is being completed under a progressive design build with Morgan Smith and Hazen. And that is a combination where the engineer is underneath the contractor, and it's really a setup that's going to help us get the best schedule for this project, where constructability, value engineering, and looking at the procurement of items through owner direct purchase, long lead items, is going to help crash the schedule and also give us the best value for the project. The other component, the PR3, is broken out into two different procurement methods. The first of which is under construction manager at risk with PRMRWSA, and that is for 2 large pump stations and also the large diameter conveyance pipeline. We feel that we get the best value for our money on this project by having the contractor involved, again, early on with constructability reviews, value engineering, and construction techniques that are going to produce the best cost savings on that project. With the reservoir number 3, we're actually going to be advertising a pre-qualification for reservoir contractors later this month. That we're proposing to do a design bid build, as we feel that the contractor that can best manage their staff with this large earth-moving project, manage overtime, understands the ground conditions, weather, we're going to see that value in the lowest qualified bidder. And all that's being done under HDR as the engineer of record for the design. So the individual project updates, we're done with the phase 1 design of the PRF expansion, and we're currently underway on the first design amendment, which is for structural design of the pretreatment and filters of the Peace River facility expansion. The second design amendment, we would expect to come back to the board at the next board meeting with a final design amendment, and then in August come back for a GMP amendment to start construction. The cost, which is over a year old from our preliminary engineering report at 30%, was about $153 million for this project. Engineers' estimates are plus or minus 40%. And then looking at our CMAR, who got the project right after they were done with the engineering report, they felt the market conditions were more about $160 million. So fast forward to just recently in January, we received a rough order of magnitude from our progressive design build team. And as the design furthers, we have a slightly larger pre-treatment facility, and that footprint equates to about $174 million now for a cost estimate, rough order of magnitude from our progressive design build team.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So I appreciate the projections here to give us some worst case scenarios maybe, and updating these numbers. I'm hearing on the street, and I know this is specialized work, but with things going on in Washington, cost increases for materials, things like that. Has that been factored in, because those things may not hit for the next several months?
You're absolutely correct. In fact, it's like you were in the room with us earlier this week talking about this. So some of those tariffs, that's kind of an unknown. But there is a projected escalation that's included in the overall cost that's been presented in the ROM. Some of that could be used towards tariffs, but really don't know exactly what the effect is on some of the items. But what we are trying to do is, through owner direct purchase, get ahead of some of those tariffs and place those orders as early as we can before those are implemented. But working with our progressive design build team, when they get the quotes from contractors and vendors, they're going to separate out anything that could be tariff related, so we'll know what that additional cost is in the project.
I happen to know somebody in a specialty pipe and valve business for 35 years, and he started to see increases that he's telling his customers, get ready. We're not sure of the duration, but we're seeing just right off the top 10%. Just start building it in to your project cost. Could be more, could be less, could be nothing, could be a push. You know, we don't know at this point, but when you look at projects like this, the amount of materials we're going to need, that could be a significant increase. And you know, we look at the timing of this project and these policies that are being put in place. So just wondering what it's going to mean for our ratepayers, and is it going to be a budget buster?
Understood. I know we were talking just earlier this week about using about $40 million in owner direct purchase. So if you go with the 10% mark, yeah, we could see an increase of a couple $1 million if tariffs are really come to fruition on this project. But what we do have right now is a healthy contingency that's been added to the estimate that the design build team has come up with. So,
Are you seeing or hearing from your vendors that, I guess with labor and other things, it's starting to get a little more competitive? I know this is a specialty thing, but I know in other segments of construction, there's starting to be pressure to push prices down because some of the work in certain sectors is slowing down. This one I'm not so sure of because it's such a specialty.
yeah, I can't say I've seen it slow down on the municipal work, the large capital projects. But we are negotiating with our design build teams and CMARs, and so that's always on our mind is, getting the best value for the authority.
Yeah, I see we're, for me, we're in a very difficult time with so many variables out there, let's call it that. You want to lock in and hedge and protect, but what if you lock in and things go the other way? It's like, wait a minute, we just locked up and left money on the table. But then if you don't lock in and things go up, it's like, why didn't we lock in?
Yeah.
None of us has a crystal ball, but there's just a lot of uncertainty. It just so happens we're in the middle of these projects. So hopefully things will work out. There's people a lot smarter than me in this room that are in the finance industry that probably crunch those kind of numbers and figure those things out. That's all I have, just comments.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments on this matter? Okay, keep rolling. Sure.
Thank you. So as I mentioned, we do have a healthy contingency that's been added to this rough order of magnitude, hopefully to handle some of those issues that could come up. Some of the value engineering that the team has already implemented, we've added a blending tank to the project instead of adding a new filter press. That saved the project $2.2 million. We looked at under drain material, changed the stainless steel to HDPE. That was a $2.3 million savings to the project. And then instead of adding an additional pump to the recycle station, the engineers determined that just slight improvements to that station could suffice for this project. So that pump savings equates to about $1.2 million. And just so you know, the team is always looking at other opportunities for value engineering. Just some of them that I thought I'd mention here today is possibly reducing the footprint where we thought we were originally going to have a retaining wall where the ground slopes off. I think we can actually slope the grade off because it's really close to our property line with the DeSoto County Fire Station just north of the facility. So if we can just grade the area instead of having a retaining wall, we could have a savings of about $2 million. We're also looking at decreasing the size and the wall thickness of our pretreatment structure. That could be a savings of about $1 million. And then doing ODP on process piping, which could save us about $1 million. So just to name a few of the things we're looking into. And for some history, the last progressive design build, well, we've had 2 of them now, but looking at the phase 2B for Charlotte County, we started off with a rough order magnitude with the contractor at $96 million. And as the design progressed, working with that contractor, we were able to kind of engineer out certain high cost items. On this project in particular, they had to cross 17 canals on Hillsborough and Chancellor. And instead of drilling those, we figured out a way to open cut those, and that was a major part of that cost savings. But just to see the kind of success we've seen on a previous model where we start off with a high rough order magnitude with a high contingency, and we work our way down to the GMP. So the Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3, current state of that, we are complete with 100% design with HDR's work. We've got permit applications in, we've got their cost estimates, and the next presentation I'll have, we'll be looking at the work order 4 for them to participate in construction, engineering, and inspection, and also procurement assistance of that reservoir contractor. So looking at the cost for the PR3, at the top in the green boxes are the CMAR costs, covering, again, those 2 large pump stations and large diameter pipe. And the bottom is the reservoir number 3 cost, which will be bid out. So our 30% engineer's estimate, a couple years old now, was at $245 million for reservoir 3, $119 million for the CMAR costs. We turned over, brought the CMAR on board, their first shot at cost estimate. They're actually a little bit less than the projected cost from the engineer on their components, mainly because of some of those value engineering opportunities that were implemented. but they felt that the current market for the reservoir was more in line with $275 million. What we have today is a 90% construction major at risk cost. Even though our CMAR is not building the reservoir, it's a contractor's perspective on what the reservoir cost would be. And there's been several additions to the reservoir design related to additional geotech testing that's been done, identified some areas that need work for preloading, some areas that will experience maybe some settlement that we need to handle. And that's really driven up the cost of the project, not necessarily the market, but the additional design that's had to go into the reservoir between the 30% and the 90%. So right now, that is the total cost estimate we have for the PR3 project. Some of the value engineering, really, when you look at a 5-mile long reservoir, you make small changes, it's got big impacts to the project. And at the 30% level, our CMAR looked at the reservoir dam section and had some suggestions based on previous projects, and that actually equated to about $45 million in savings. So could be a lot higher. I wish it was lower, but it definitely could be higher. They also had ideas to do sheeting for the reservoir pump station instead of a pipe to bring in water. That's a savings of about $5 million. And then the ODP that the board previously approved starting in December and then February, that equates to about $1.4 million in savings, mainly due to taxes. Some of the value engineering that we're still looking into is open cutting Kings Highway to cross with the 84-inch instead of doing the microtunnel. We're just starting the design process of that. And if we can open cut across, I know Commissioner Langford said he would grab a shovel. If he
Me
had
too. That's our deal. We're both going to be there with the shovels on that one.
Would this be like?
I haven't forgotten.
Would this be like the tunnel? You could start on different ends.
Yes.
And
We'll meet in the middle.
So we're still looking at those ideas. Also, we're sampling local rock quarries. I think there's an opportunity where we can find a local supplier instead of railing in some of our aggregate from outside of Florida even. And then Jim Guida's group is looking at on-site mitigation. It's far less costly than going to mitigation banks. So our permitting through the ERP and 404 process really dictate how much on-site mitigation we can do versus buying mitigation credits. So this schedule was presented in December. This was the anticipated schedule for calendar year 2025 for board action items. This is what we're looking at today, and some of these projects, the guaranteed maximum price has been pushed out. It's been pushed out for the reason where I've shown you some of our rough order magnitude costs that have a high contingency, and we prefer not to bring to the board a high dollar amount of contingency rather than further the design closer to 90% even, maybe even 100, and get that contingency number down so the GMP will reflect closer to actual costs. So the motion in front of the board today is going to be for the proposed Reservoir 1 pump station. You can see it just to the right of the screen of the existing Reservoir 1 pump station. And what we're projecting to do is put in the steel sheeting associated with the river intake. The foundation work for this plan has been done for several months, and the contractor has had it priced. We want to take advantage of the dry season while we can, and now is a great time to start that work for the contractor as well. So we could actually shave off a total of about 4 months on the overall project by starting now in the dry season. So the early works package for that foundation work is $6.24, $320. And there's about $500,000 in contingency and allowance on that GMP. With that, I'd like to entertain questions the board has before going to the motion.
Any questions for staff? You recognize, sir.
Yeah, I appreciate the work on this, and especially the value engineering, which everyone's going through right now. But one thing I want to keep in mind, and I'm sure you guys are taking a good hard look at these things, but this facility needs to be in service for decades, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. And when we're value engineering, I just want to keep that in mind. If we're downscaling some, of the materials and things like that, I really don't want it to be at risk of 20, 30 years from now and then come back and redo redoing this. I know you're looking at that, but just to get it out there on the table that this facility needs to last generationally. And so we may pay a little more now, but if it offsets repairs and having maintenance problems and things like that in the future, I want to be very careful about that. So again, I'm sure you guys are looking at that, but I just want to get out of the table.
Understood. Yes, thank you.
That was a good comment, just follow up. So on the value engineering, is it impacting the lifespan of the project, or will it still maintain the lifespan that we expect?
It would still maintain the lifespan we expect.
And maintenance costs as well. I mean, is it going to increase maintenance costs on some of these value engineered items?
That's a good point, and I think we spent quite a few meetings talking about even our under drains, going with a different product than what we have. And so we look at the total life cycle cost analysis, operation and maintenance costs when we make those decisions. Like you said, a small capital cost savings up front, if it means longer payments over a 20-year period, or we have to replace it sooner, we're not going to do it. So,
that's good to know that that's part of the consideration. Yeah, good point. Any other comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion on this item.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion and second to move item number 5 and approve the construction agreement between the authority and construction manager at risk, CMAR, for the Peace River Regional Reservoir number 3, PR3 Reservoir Pump Station Early Works Package in the amount not to exceed $6,240,320. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. Thank you, sir. We will move on to item number 6. Which is the contract services amendment for CEI services.
For the record, Mike Knowles with authority staff, presenting regular agenda item number 6. This is the PR3 HDR contract services amendment 4 for CEI services. There will be a motion at the conclusion of this presentation for consideration of the 4th work order with our engineer of record HDR for CEI services. So going over the construction approach, the proposed scope and fee from HDR before entertaining any questions the board has before considering this motion is the agenda for today. So this first work order, the thought here, and we presented on this before, is that every contractor bid that we accept and we go forward with either GMP or lowest qualified bidder, there'd be a corresponding amendment to this work order 4 for HDR, for construction engineering services. We don't want to include the entire CEI services in the first work order in case something's delayed, something falls behind, something changes. So this is really just to capture the needs right now for the early works. And you would expect to see, when we bring back, say, the reservoir bids in October for the GMP for volume 4, the large diameter pipe, we would also have a corresponding amendment for HDR. And it would be HDR as our engineer of record over the reservoir, and Hazen is one of their major sub-consultants that would be engineer of record over some of the other components on PR3. So the proposed scope and fee, we've only included about 9 months of project management. The field work associated with any changes that we're making in the field, including additional survey of Kings Highway and monitoring our water levels out there at the future reservoir site and the existing reservoir, as well as continuing our permitting efforts. Although the applications have been submitted, there's going to be REIs, responses. We need to close out those permits with the Water Management District, the Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and then DeSoto County building permits, which we're meeting with Mandy right after this meeting. Then we have our next scope item is the construction plan updates. So even though we're at 100% design plans, our CMAR is looking at the plans as a final constructability, any value engineering opportunities. They're also reviewing the pay item descriptions to make sure there's no glaring holes that could cause a change order as soon as the project's issued. There's a technical peer review being done by Black & Veatch to look at the geotech, the specifications, and really the design of the reservoir. That technical peer review is also done on reservoir number 2. HDR actually did that technical peer review. So, and then we have our owner's agent that's looking at specific value engineering opportunities, mainly related to our pipe penetrations through the reservoir embankment. Right now we've got some really heavy concrete tunneling that's being done, and it's about a $12 million item for the project. So we're just looking at there's other opportunities to do those pipe penetrations through the embankment. And then any regulatory requirements coming out of the final permitting effort, HDR will provide some plans to meet those requirements. They have CMAR services during construction, so those components under Archer Western. They're doing engineer of record inspection, R5 shop drawings, but I do want to note the authority is doing the full-time inspection out there for those components of the project. Then we have the reservoir number 3, construction management. Obviously, we haven't put that out to bid, and we haven't gone forward with that, but there is a procurement process that they're going to help out with, including reviewing the bids and producing conform plans if we get RAIs on the advertisement. And then lastly, the emergency action plan, operation and maintenance manuals, and a small owner's allowance is included. With that, I'd like to entertain any questions the board has on work order 4 for HDR before going to the motion.
Any questions from staff? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and move approval to approve and authorize the executive director to execute work order number 4, East River Regional Reservoir PR3 construction phase services, in the amount of $3,605,309.
Second.
Okay, we have motion and second to move the item number 6. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, next we're going to move on to the tentative budget for FY 2026.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and we have your staff. Very pleased to be here to present the FY26 tentative budget.
Name for the record?
Ann Lee.
Did she say it? Did I miss it?
I think so.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. Pursuant to the second amended interlocal agreement, the authority is obligated to create a tentative budget no later than May 15th and a final budget no later than August 15th, which drives the budget calendar you see here. At our February 6th meeting, Mr. Anderson reviewed the governing documents, discussed budget issues and considerations for FY26. At the March 5th professional staff meeting, we reviewed the tentative budget. And today we're presenting the tentative budget for your consideration, and we'll bring back a final budget for your consideration on August 6th. Between now and August 6th, there are 2 professional staff meetings and 1 additional board meeting, so if there's any changes that needed to be made, we have plenty of time to do so. Similar to your respective counties, water operations, the authority is set up as a single enterprise fund. All of our operating funds come from water sales and planning assessments to our 5 customers, and we do not levy any taxes to support our activities. Budgetarily, the enterprise fund is broken into 2 cost centers. The administrative side, which houses the Lakewood Ranch office, which is executive, finance, and HR staff, as well as their related expenses, and the facilities group, which includes everything else, water production, construction, engineering, etc. Before we get into the details of our tentative budget, here's an overview of the tentative budget charges per cost center as compared to the current fiscal year. As shown here, the administrative office makes up less than 1% of the total budget, and the tentative increase for this cost center is roughly $34,000. The remaining 99% of our budget is under the facilities cost center, and that increase is slated to be about $29 million, mostly driven by the CIP projects that Mike just discussed with you. In aggregate, the FY26 tentative budget is about $29.1 million higher than the current budget year. In terms of revenues, here's a comparison of the total revenues found within the FY26 tentative budget as compared to the current fiscal year. Water sale revenue for FY26 is expected to increase by about $2.3 million. CIP funds reflect an increase of about $25.3 million, and these funds would be coming from the debt issuance we discussed earlier as well as the potential second debt issuance later this calendar year. Grant revenue is expected to remain flat. The other category, which includes planning assessments, member fees, and interest income, is also expected to remain flat. Reserve fund, which includes internal transfers from the R&R reserve fund as well as a rate stabilization account, is also the same as 2025. And lastly, carry forward funds, which include the debt service coverage funds that we collect this year, as well as our normal carry forward, is slightly increased to $3.9 million. To further discuss the revenues, the majority of the authority's operating revenues are derived from the water rate. The authority's water rate is made up of two components, the base charge and the water use charge. The base rate charge is comprised of several items. The fixed operating costs, which are charged based upon the capacity allocations you see here. The debt service costs, which are charged based on customer participation in the debt. The DeSoto County payment, which increased for FY26 in accordance with the third amendment of the Master Water Supply Contract. And lastly, contributions to those system-wide benefit projects. This charge is levied on a monthly basis, no matter how much water your respective counties take. The second part of the water rate is the water use charge, which represents the authority's variable costs. So for us specifically, those variable costs are only what's we use to make the water, power, chemicals, and residual disposal. This charge is levied on a monthly basis based upon the actual metered use to each of our customers. This graph shows the historical base rate charge from FY22 through 25, as well as the proposed FY26 base rate. The FY26 tentative budget base rate totals about $34.6 million, which is an increase of 6.4%, or roughly $2 million over the current fiscal year. The majority of this increase in the base rate is reflective of the additional 2024B debt. That's part of the debt that we closed in October that was for Sarasota County's Phase 3C pipeline, as well as the increased DeSoto County payment. The other rate-related portion of our base rate, which includes fixed operating costs as well as fund transfers and other rate-related expenditures, increased roughly $100,000 from the current fiscal year. In terms of base rate per customer, this chart reflects the changes from the current fiscal year to the FY26 tentative budget. As you can see here, there's some dramatic swings when you compare for year to year on this part, and most of those dramatic swings are related to the changes in the debt issuance per each customer, as well as the changes in that DeSoto County payment. Similar to the graphic that we showed for the base rate, this shows the water use rate charge in the budget from 22 and through the proposed FY26 budget. Significant increases in power and chemical costs 22 through 24 is what caused that huge jump between 82 cents to $1.09 per thousand gallons. Luckily, over the last 2 years, those dramatic increases have moderated, and in 26, we're requesting an increase of about 3 cents per thousand gallons, which is a less than 3% increase in the water use charge, roughly in line with inflation. Just like your respective counties, the authority engages with a rate consultant that helps us look at our near and long-term rates to ensure we continue to budget in accordance with policies. Stantec is our rate consultant, and this model is updated throughout the year for actual results, as well as reviewing escalation factors and assumptions that we modify regularly. What you're seeing here is a shot from the authority's rate model, which reflects the need for the variable rate to increase to $1.16 per thousand gallons in 26, as well as 2 to 4 cent per thousand gallon increases over the 10-year period. This is a slight contrast to the model results that we shared with you last year, which are shown in green on this slide, which reflected a 4 cent per thousand gallon increase was required for FY26. So we were able to bring that down with our process. Outside of the water rate, the authority has relatively small assessments on the revenue side, which include member fees and planning assessments. The member fee supports the administrative cost center for the authority, and this fee is proposed to increase roughly $34,000 from the 2025 budget. Member fees are collected based on board policy, where half of the member fee is split equally between the 4 members, and half of the member fee is based upon your pro rata share of the regional population. The last revenue item is the management and planning assessment. This assessment covers planning projects like the Integrated Regional Water Supply Plan, Strategic Plan, coordinating with Polk Water, updates to the Master Water Supply Contract, those type of things. In past budgets, this management and planning fee increased and decreased dramatically throughout the years. So in FY23, we instituted a policy where we would look ahead 3 years, average out those costs to provide a stable assessment for our members and customers. FY26 is the first year of that next 3-year period, and based on our review of the projects that we expect for this planning and management assessment, we are recommending the fee to stay at $475,000. This assessment by board policy is split equally between all 5 customers, and it's based on the pro rata share of the population. So you do see differences, increases and decreases here, even though the total is the same, but that is due to population distribution changes. In terms of those expected needs for the FY26 through 28 period, this table represents those expectations and how we came to that $475,000 recommendation on that planning assessment. In terms of expenses, here's a comparison of the total expenses found within the FY's 26 tentative budget to the current fiscal year. Operations and maintenance is up about 3.3%, $155,000. Debt service has increased about $1.5 million. Projects, which include CIP projects, R&R projects, and those management and planning projects, is up about $26.4 million. County payments increased to $937,000 in accordance with Exhibit A of the Master Water Supply Contract. Disbursements are slightly higher this fiscal year. And then other, which includes contributions to the R&R reserve and various internal transfers, decreased slightly.
I have a question for
Yes,
you real
sir.
quick, on the PFAS study
Okay.
and planning.
All right.
So I'm hearing more and more about this, and I know there's some lawsuits out there. Where are we as an authority regarding those types of PFAS lawsuits, recovery, and ongoing expenses to continually study the issue?
So now, yeah, then we go to the general counsel on this one. So we are involved in the lawsuits, and the settlements are progressing. Try to keep you up to date with that. The idea is that the ability to file a claim, at least with one of the 3 vendors that sold it, ends in 1 week. So yeah, and the reason why that's important is there's only a certain set amount of money that you can put aside. So until that number of claimants is determined, you can't determine the amount of money you're going to have to settle it. By the end of the summer, we should be seeing some money coming back on it. So we were involved in the lawsuits with 3M and the other 2 vendors. And through a firm in New Orleans, our firm is associated with them. They were the ones that were filing all the claims for most of the larger utilities, 2 different law firms. It's not a class action suit, but it looks like, acts like, and the claims administrator is treating it just like the class action lawsuit. So the idea is the settlements will be paid out over 5 years. So we'll be getting in the income to be able to offset potentially what happens on planning and implementation. I guarantee you is with any utility beyond even the authority, whatever money I receive probably will not be enough to pay for the treatment that will be, because it'll be ongoing with PFAS. But it'll at least give you the idea of being able to plan, engineer, design, potentially, and implement some PFAS treatment.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, PFAS, correct me if I'm wrong, it's just a chemical that's been used in manufacturing for over 4 decades.
Do you remember that stuff you used to spray in their sneakers?
Yeah, yeah.
We
It's
all
in
know.
food wrappers, when you order a hamburger from a fast food place, and it gets into the environment, it does not break down, it gets into water, and there's acceptable limits of this. It's, so I'm not a scientist, but I know it's an issue that people are grappling with on number one, how to eliminate it, if it could ever be eliminated, or reduce it to the point where it's not going to impact the health, safety, and welfare of our respective communities. So these costs associated with study and planning, are those legal fees? Are we studying our water, taking samples as part of this, recovery process?
Those are not legal fees, so I can chime in on this one. They're not legal fees, no. We have to respond to the EPA's schedule to do sampling and determine the levels. That's a 3-year ongoing sampling schedule, followed by implementation if you don't meet the standards. So we have to plan for, first of all, determine if we're going to be above or below the required levels, and then if we're above them, determine what treatment process we need to implement. So,
Okay.
can I have one more?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and there is some ongoing debate, like everything else with tariffs and everything else in Washington, on those very levels. They may change in the future and be more favorable to utilities. So that is still an ongoing debate as well. So don't know is the answer.
Yeah, because the cost associated with cleaning the water further, who knows what those numbers are, what the process is.
Correct.
Yeah.
We don't know.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that.
All right. So as we look at the individual categories for the operations and maintenance group, the total operations and maintenance budget is about $30.2 million. Power and chemical costs have increased in aggregate about $304,000 or 2.4%. Staff and benefit costs are projected to increase 5%. That is with the addition of 2 new full-time personnel, as well as a 4% increase in compensation, which is in line with inflation and our pay plan. And we will discuss the full-time employees in more detail in one moment. The R&M increase, repairs and maintenance increase, is about 3.4% or $83,000. Contract services, which includes services like general engineering, reservoir permitting, the hydrobiological monitoring program, is up about 5.9% or $164,000. And a substantial portion of that increase is related to a 5-year report that we have to do on that HVMP project. So next for FY27, you'll see that category go down dramatically. Lastly, there's a slight increase in machinery and equipment as we continue to support our lab with equipment. We have vehicles that have to get replaced, as well as their typical computer and server replacements that occur in any business. To more fully explore and follow up with the February discussion about the need for 2 additional full-time employees, one specifically for a construction inspector, what you're seeing here is how the staff were utilized during and after the construction of Reservoir 2, as well as our proposed staffing needs for Reservoir 3. For Reservoir 2, there were 4 inspectors, and after construction, those positions were converted to the post-construction needs of additional environmental, operations, and maintenance staff. For Reservoir 3, we envision a similar situation where those construction inspectors that are brought on for the duration of the project would then be converted to a project manager or other similar position. We also envision the need to bring on additional environmental, maintenance, and operations staff to care for the additional infrastructure, as well as our planning for retirements that will be occurring in the 5-year period. Outside of planning for the future, the additional on-staff construction inspector will save the authority and those participating in this project money. Just looking at the annual cost for an on-staff construction inspector, that cost would be about $120,000 a year. If you look at that same role being done through our consultant, it would cost about $348,000 more a year, which really adds up over that 3-year construction period. So due to these cost savings, as well as our planning for the future, we do recommend the inclusion of the construction inspector FTE position for FY26.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, how was that an event where we talked about AI and it's here to stay? I mean, that's just the way it is with technology. So, as local governments and other agencies, we look at ways to harness that for efficiencies going forward. Is the authority, do we have people that are looking at AI and how it can augment or be worked into our operations to maybe down the road save an FTE because you have the assistive AI maybe with an operator in the plant. You have AI kind of working in the background. Are there programs that are out there for utilities that somebody's looking at?
In all honesty, I'm not prepared to answer that question, especially where it pertains to operations or engineering or planning.
Okay.
But I can speak to AI for finance. We do have a very small finance team, as you guys are well known, and I have myself and I have 2 other people that we handle all of that. We have looked at programs of doing like OCR, automatic recognition for, scanning an invoice in and having it pull out. And what I have discovered, at least in the current iteration of those programs, is that you still have to have somebody there checking everything all the time until the system finally learns. So at this time for finance, even though I'm all about using new technologies, it just isn't feasible. If we had a bigger team where we could have one person dedicated to just making sure everything's ticking in time through that type of program, it would be a different situation.
Well, look, like anything else with technology, this is why I said I'm forward thinking on it. I understand there may be applications that don't apply today, but maybe this is to Mr. Anderson, is that part of our long range outlook to, see where AI, because the costs are going to come down. You used to get a brick phone. I remember when I got my first phone back in the 80s, it was, couple $1,000. Now you can get one of these, they give them away if you sign up for the service plan, and it does 1,000 times what the old phones used to do. So AI is going to go that way. So I guess basically as a policy and discussion of this committee, of this board, do we want to just kind of keep our eyes open to see, I don't want to be the pilot program, but others are using it, So you may have it in finance. It may audit in the background and catch things that you're missing that may save money while you're auditing AI. You know what I'm saying?
Yes,
There's different ways it can be used. So I guess my point is, since we're going over the budget, we always look for ways to find efficiencies and save money. Is that on the table? So I just wanted to bring it up for, future discussion, and maybe look at that. Yes?
Yeah, to answer the question directly, like right now, it's not in the budget, no.
Right.
Other than my wife says I have artificial intelligence. But no, that is something, I appreciate you bringing that up, it's something we do need to start looking at. I think it's very early in the development of AI right now, but there's certainly applications for operations, for water quality monitoring, I think out there, things we can look at to keep the transmission system, operating optimally and stuff like that. So
because I can tell you there's an entrepreneur who is going to figure out an application for utilities and an AI application, and they'll be knocking on the door at some point to sell you their stuff. That's just the way it works. So just thought I'd bring it up since we're talking about budget. Thank you. Go ahead.
Pivoting back to the review of the budget, the other rate-related expenditures portion of the budget primarily represents those internal fund transfers, contingency funds, debt service coverage payments. This portion of the budget totals about $8.2 million, which reflects a decrease from the FY25 budget of about $211,000.
They might come out with an AI to replace commissioners.
But we didn't have as much fun then.
There may only be one of us up here one day. Keep going.
In terms of projects, we projected about $226 million in expenditures for the FY26 CIP projects, which includes the surface water system expansion program, as well as the completion of the 2 pipelines that Mike discussed earlier. We expect roughly $74.5 million to come from grants, with the balance of the funding coming from the bond issuances that we discussed earlier. There are also 2 system-wide benefit projects in this section, the water resource building and the solar array. Lastly, the budget includes disbursements of about $1.8 million to our customers. This is from the debt service coverage funds collected in FY25, as well as the 2014B bond refunding savings. Those are the bonds that we closed in October. We're collecting based on the 2014 amortization schedule, but in reality our charges are less, so about $335,000 coming back to the customers from that for this year. In aggregate, when you look at the annual budget in terms of its pieces, the O&M costs shown in orange are increasing slightly through time, generally in line with inflation. The non-O&M portion of our budget shown in blue, that's the debt service, internal transfers, those fund disbursements, are fairly stable, and any dramatic increases or decreases are purely associated with that debt service payment. The largest change this fiscal year, as it has been for the last couple years, is the CIP portion of the budget shown in green. And this increase in the CIP is going to continue to dominate our budget through FY28 or 29 as that surface water system expansion project comes to completion. With that, I'll take any additional questions or discussion.
Any questions? Mr. Langford?
No, I was just gonna make a motion to approve the tentative budget for the fiscal year 2026 in the amount of $285,001,509.
Do we have a second?
So,
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Cutzinger?
Yeah, this is tentative,
Yes, sir.
so when are you hiring the 2 new full-time employees?
It would not, if the budget is approved in August, we would be looking to commence that hiring process for FY26, which would be in October.
And I would definitely like to see a little more detail on the solar array. We had $500,000 there.
Yes, sir.
Let's see what is that and more details on that before we approve the final budget. I mean, personally, I know that has to be support.
Isn't that what our electricity bill runs a month? Pretty close.
It's higher, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. It's not an electric bill that I would want to personally pay. I'd be yelling for people to turn off the lights.
So we have a motion and a second to approve the tentative budget for FY 2026. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. And there's a part 2 here with a resolution. Are you going to do a separate presentation on that?
No, sir, I
Okay.
just included it right here in this. This budget item number 2 is for resolution 2025-05. And all this resolution does is formalize the board's adoption of the FY26 tentative budget.
Well, this is for the rates, fees, and charges.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion to move the resolution.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to move the resolution. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition to the motion? Passes unanimously. We will move on to the General Counsel's report. Mr. Manson.
Chair, you stole my thunder. It was going to be an update on the PFAS
Okay.
settlement, and I already updated you on that. I don't have anything further.
Okay, thank you. Executive Director's report. Mr. Anderson, you're
thank you, Mr.
recognized.
Chair. The only thing I have to add is, we discussed in February, we made a trip to Tallahassee to speak with the legislatures about getting our projects in their appropriations. And we had a successful visit. I'm happy to announce we're in the House budget for both the pipeline project and the surface water expansion projects. It's not as much as we had asked for, but it's a tough budget year in Tallahassee, and they supported it at about half what we asked for. We asked for $21 million. They put it in for $10 million. So we'll wait and see what happens, but it's better than not being in the game, or at least in the game.
Hey, if you can't get the whole loaf of bread, I'll take half.
Absolutely. It's part of our strategy to chip these costs down as much as we can, any way we can. So other than that, thank you.
Okay. Any questions on the routine status reports that are contained in the agenda packet? Okay. We will move on to board member comments. I'll start to my right. Any comments?
I have a statement for AI. I just want to know why if I buy a pair of shoes, I get 2 shoes, but if I buy a pair of keys, I only get 1 bird.
Is that one of those dad jokes?
No.
We heard a lot of those in the EOC during the hurricane. A lot of dad jokes. Commissioner Cutzinger, any comments?
No, just one of our favorite current subjects, and we've got to do some public relations work on this. Had a lot of constituents talk about Florida. And in fact, on the way out this morning, I felt kind of in my ear on that. So just, you know, we don't add fluoride to our water, and I know we're working on that, but our different communities, if we can get that message out to folks that no, we do not add fluoride to our water.
We're the same in Charlotte County.
Same thing. That's it. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, Commissioner Beard.
I have nothing at this time, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I have nothing. We'll move on to public comments. Any individuals who previously submitted a request to speak card and didn't have enough time will have 3 minutes to speak. And our family is gone that spoke earlier. Is there anybody that wants to speak? Well, this is your opportunity, 3 minutes. Okay, see nobody rise. The announcements, next authority board meeting, Wednesday, June 4th, 2025, the 9:30 Sarasota County Administrative Center. And then there's a list for future meetings, August 6th, October 1st, December 3rd. Gentlemen, we have completed our agenda. This meeting is adjourned.
I can see it going up.
Yeah.